Today we're going to be discussing the origins of freestyle chess, formerly known as Chess 960, originally known as Fischer Random. We're also going to be reviewing the final game in the first Fischer Random World Championship match, which was played in 2019 between Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen. Who's going to win? We'll find out. Fischer Random was created in 1996, of course by Bobby Fischer, to place an emphasis on creativity rather than studying opening theory. A man ahead of his time for sure. I must say, winning the first World Championship match in Fischer Random has got to be the biggest flex of all time. Arguably, that might be a bigger flex than winning the actual World Championship match. What's amazing about this game, Wesley So was on fire this tournament. He played this at 94 accuracy. I don't know if you guys understand how insane that is, because you see Super GMs blundering on move 3, move 4, move 5. This guy played this game at 94 accuracy, so even Magnus did not stand a chance. He's like, Magnus, you've won the Blitz World Championship match, the Rapid, the Classical too many times. You're not about to take the Fischer Random match title as well and hold everything. He's like, not on my watch. So we're going to get into it. I wanted to look over a Fischer game playing Fischer Random, and there's no recorded games. How unfortunate is that? If you guys find a recorded game, let me know. I'll happily make a video on it. This is my favorite format in chess because you know how I feel about opening theory. Long intro, out of the way, let's go. Pawn d4. Queen's pawn opening. Except in this case, it's a rook pawn opening. See, so Fischer Random, we got a queen. As long as they're symmetrical, that's the rules. It was called Chess 960 because they just wanted to eliminate the name Fischer in it. And there are 960 starting positions. I guess now it's called Freestyle Chess because it hits a larger audience. And actually, this is just a babbling intro. So we're going to put on our thinking cap and our freestyle shades. And now we're going to lock into chess. Are you still with me? Let's go. So we got pawn to d4. What's amazing about Fischer Random is human bias makes people put the pieces where they're used to seeing it in the middle game. That's why accuracies are typically so low. But it does really change the structure of the pawn structure, right? Because the pawns are the exoskeleton of a position in chess. You base it around where your pieces are placed. So that's why you get wacky pawn structures. And from wacky pawn structures, you get interesting theory. You get interesting ideas. We get pawn to b6, the Owens defense. Not really, but we do get a hyper-modern opening. Maybe to go bishop a6 to try to pin this guy. Maybe to go bishop to b7, set up a battery. Time will tell. And then we get knight to g3. Funny seeing the move knight to g3. First knight move, odd square. We get bishop to a6, okay, pinning the pawn, trying to take away castling rights. And Wesley So is like, Magnus, you're kind of good at chess. I like your idea. I'm going to go for the fianchetto as well. Magnus is like, okay, but you're not going to pin my e-pawn down to my bishop. He's like, okay, I don't need to. I'm going to go c4 and cut the diagonal of your bishop. So already, interesting pawn structure. And Magnus is playing hyper-modern. He's like, come at me, bro. You get a space advantage. We're people. We're going to mess up. We have human error. Wesley So is like, I'm not too human this tournament. I'm just going to play like a computer. We got pawn to d5, pawn to e3, right? Kind of like a Tarrasch setup pawn structure, maybe. Don't quote me on that, but it is. Over defending c4 so he doesn't lose it. Magnus develops the bishop. Wesley So develops the knight. We got knight to g6. All right, both sides getting their pieces out. We'll start focusing on when the game has sparks, when pieces fly. Knight to d7, fully developing, and then Wesley elects to trade. Why? Because you're aiming at the bishop, so you kind of get a free rook lift out of it. That he does. We get e takes d5 and knight to f5. A very nice move. He's like, Magnus, I'm going to take your bishop and then park my bishop on a3, where it's going to be a very nice diagonal, right? The knight even might get pinned. Magnus is like, I get out of the pin. He's like, I still want your bishop. He's like, okay, I get a rook lift out of this now. And pawn to b4. What is the point of this move? Well, somewhat it's to deter the move pawn c5. However, pawn c5 just could not be played because you take with the d pawn and you're going to end up winning this. Right now the knight can't take because the b pawn defends c5. So you win a central pawn. You'll easily win that game. So Magnus cannot fight for the center. So he goes knight f6. Wesley's like, okay, I'm going to deep freeze your pawn structure. I'm going to clamp down. Magnus is like, that's not a deep freeze. Wesley's like, yes, it is. a4. Right? Because now after pawn takes, if you were to get pawn takes, the a pawn cannot move because of en passant and the queen guards. So we get h5. Computers do like flank moves. Magnus is basically like a human computer. So he's pushing his flank pawn. Good stuff. h3, he's like, no back rank, checkmate. I'm opening up a left for my king. And he's finally getting his queen on the board. So queen to c8, getting it into the position. We get takes, rook to e6. Why did Magnus not take on c6? He could have. Maybe he didn't like knight e2 and just the c file and all the activity that white's going to get. So he elected not to take on c6. Rather, he went rook e6. He's like, I want to pick it up with the rook, create a queen-rook battery. Wesley's like, okay, I'm going to go f3 and expand in the center. Magnus takes, and Wesley expands in the center. So now we get an interesting middle game. Why is this interesting? Because white gets hanging pawns in the center of the board. Things to note about hanging pawns. If you have them, you don't want to trade. You want to leave as many pieces on the board as possible to defend them and use them dynamically. Right now, they control all these squares on the 5th rank. The more pieces you lose, the weaker the pawns, because then in the end game, black is going to be able, or your opponent rather, is going to be able to claim a hole, claim a post, and punish the structure. So less pieces on the board, worse the hanging pawns. Very good chess players, like the best of the best, are very good with hanging pawns. Not the best of the best are not the best with hanging pawns. That's what I would note in this type of position. I'm thinking of so many games with these positions right now, but we're not even going to reference them. We're going to talk about the game because we already vented. We get knight to e5. That is not a free knight because that is a pinned rook. So we get rook to e3. Now, why can Magnus not take the pawn? Did white just blunder a pawn? As you could see by the bar, he did not. But as you could see by an explanation, why is this not a blunder? This is not a blunder because of the cold shower move, knight to e2, hitting the rook, discovered attack on the knight, and backwards guarding the bishop, which was necessary to untie the queen from the first rank. So good stuff. So Magnus saw that, of course, so he goes knight c4, and now Wesley gets these hammers on the f-file. We get rook takes d4. What's the difference? Well, the difference now is Wesley's just coordinated for a kingside attack, so he's going to do all of the above. Now, it's roughly balanced. He gave up a queen for activity, but you see how Magnus spent so much time trying to make this queen better? Wesley spent no time at all, instead improved the rest of his pieces, and this queen is a tank on a1. He made it a tank from its starting position. I don't think you could do that in normal chess. You can only do that in Fischer Random, right? Why would a queen ever want to be on d1 or d8? They wouldn't. They just wouldn't. So we got rook takes c4. What now? Find the move. There's a few good moves here, but I like this brilliant move. Bishop to h6. Computer doesn't call it a brilliancy, but we are. The point is it tactically defends your knight, right? If knight takes d5, that would be checkmate in 1. That is good stuff. And you can't really take this bishop because if you take the bishop, your king is very open, and that just looks like checkmate, right? It just looks like you're getting checkmated intuitively. So that cannot get taken. We get knight to e8, guarding the checkmate, makes some sense, and then bishop takes g7. Now you might be like, why is this guy blundering everything? Well, he's not blundering anything actually. Wesley's idea is if knight takes bishop, for example, we get rook takes f7, and again, all of your pieces are activated, coordinated, everything, checkmate is in sight. So Magnus does not take the bishop. He's like, okay, I'm going to go for a fork. You can't checkmate me if you have no material. Wesley's like, I got a plan, don't worry. Magnus picks up a rook, and now rook to f8. Amazing. This king is almost getting checkmated, not quite. And as you can see, the bar is equal because the bar is always equal, except when we play. So we got bishop to e5, trying to get to h8. He's like, I don't need this knight, right? If you take that knight, you lose your queen. So he's like, I just don't want that knight. I'll be down some material. We got another check and find the only move here for white. See, you might be like, oh, I got to move my queen. No, you cannot. You got to fork them. Active counterplay. The king moves. White picks up a queen himself. And black takes the queen. Now the bishop takes the rook. And what is going on? Are you following this? We both got 3 pawns. How is material even? Right? Isn't that crazy? Material is even. And it was just like a whole bunch of what? It was like a whole bunch of what is going on. But it's even. But I would take white because he is more coordinated on black's pawns than black is on white's pawns. So we get the move knight to g3. Let's just look over what happens if rook takes pawn. Can you find it? Well, apparently you give a check, and after the king moves, say it moves here, I think is sensible. You just move the bishop, and this knight is just no good. It's just no bueno. It's just trapped and you're just going to win it. So that is why the pawn on a4 cannot get taken. So instead we get knight g3 going for this check. And you don't want to trade rooks as white. So he picks up a pawn. Black moves his knight out of the way. White moves his bishop all the way to the other end, right? The queen on a1, then we got a bishop on a1, then we got a bishop on h8. Crazy stuff. Pawn to g4, very good, using your pawn side majority to create a passer and dislodge this knight so that you can openly infiltrate on e7. The knight moves, saving the rook. Wesley. I'm so used to Magnus winning. Wesley still gives the check. And why is Magnus still playing? Well, the reason Magnus is still playing is this is not the easiest position in the world to win. Luckily for Wesley, he cannot take this pawn because of the fork, and I think he knows how to checkmate with a rook, bishop, and knight versus king. So he gives a check, Magnus does that is, and Wesley picks up the pawn. Are you going to be able to convert this against the best ever? You're going to need to play this very slowly, bringing your king in, making sure this knight protects the pawn at all times. Don't push the pawn too fast, because then you're just going to lose it. For example, a5, defend the knight. All of a sudden, it's not winning at all because the pawn will be won. If you don't play king b5. If you play king b4, the pawn will be won. Tricky stuff, right? Because if white pushes the pawn, then king b5, funny king placement. So king b4, never too late to lose a chess game, as you could see. We get rook to b3, rook to a4, attacking the pawn. Wesley gives a check, forcing the king back, and then he's like, okay, I probably got to improve my knight, improve my coordination, and then get my king in the game. So they're poking, they're prodding, maybe they're gaining increment, maybe Wesley is figuring out how to win. Then he starts bringing his king in. Again, always make sure the knight defends the pawn. Very instructive. So he's poking, he's prodding, he's defending it both ways, getting his king in. Magnus is cutting his king off. He's allowing his king in, yada, yada. Gets his king in. That's a spite check. Oh, funny move. Rook to c6. Should you take the rook? Did Magnus blunder a rook? No, that's a funny stalemate trick, right? There is just no moves for black here. Funny how the engine is slow today. So we got rook to c4, right? The bar is like lagging. Rook to c4, avoiding stalemate. We get a check. The king comes in. We get another check. The king goes back. Look at this. Everything is defending everything, and he's just getting in. This must have been like torture to Magnus. I'm sure he's usually on the other end of this, but not today. Today was Wesley's day. And in this position, Magnus resigned. Why did he resign? Well, he already successfully got his king to a6, his pawn to a5. Everything defends everything. Clearly, he's showing masterful technique. So Wesley So was the first ever World Chess Championship in Fischer Random. First ever world champion in Fischer Random. Did you know that? Fun fact of the day. Thank you guys as always for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace. Boom.